brilliant role at HSBC, lots of prospects ahead of me, job security, still learning, could still grow, and I'm literally quitting for this crazy idea that may not go anywhere.
What were they thinking? The stories behind Europe's most promising clean mobility startups. Hello, my name is Dan Sobowitz, and in this new podcast, I'll be talking to some very successful startup entrepreneurs, women and men who are disrupting mobility as we know it. They're making it more sustainable and more inclusive, both for their passengers and for their employees. In this podcast, I won't be asking them about their pitch decks or their growth rates or their shareholder models. I'm much more interested in what were they thinking. How did it feel to go the lonely road of an entrepreneur? Did people follow them easily, or did they think they were crazy? Was it fun all along, or mostly frustrating? And deep down, did they really believe they were going to make it this far? This time, I have with me in the studio Danielle Walsh. Hey, Danielle.
Hi, nice to meet you.
You're the CEO of Clearly, a UK-based startup which is using AI to generate insight on trip-level emissions. So, Danielle, how did this passion for mobility ever start?
Well, passion for transportation started as I was a child. My family actually had a motor racing team. Through the family, we had my uncle was a champion in Formula Ford. I was walking track since I was a little girl with my father. I think I there saw that you had technology was at the heart, of course, of motor racing, and seeing that you can change just like millimeters just to keep the car on the road because of the speed, but also the huge amount of fuel that we're using then. I mean, the smell was almost addictive on a weekend, and just seeing then obviously the impact that it had on the environment, and doing more research to see that this is 25% of emissions. How can we solve for this? Everyone is impacted by transportation, whether you're moving you around or our goods around.
So I presume that the sensitivity to sustainability started a bit later. First, you found yourself surrounded by cars and drivers and maybe testosterone and fuel. And then at some point you start realizing there's something wrong also with this industry, and sustainability needs to be a part of it. And then fast forward, you find yourself working as Director for Technology Investment at HSBC, Investment Banking, where you're still looking at mobility.
Yes, correct. I was very lucky in HSBC. I joined and had a very broad remit, working globally with our biggest clients, multinational companies, working across transportation very broadly. So it could be from energy to the infrastructure to auto manufacturers themselves. And the role was first to front the bank around what we did on technology, and then have a two-way knowledge share with our customers. And there I saw that the disruption and the opportunity was not just technology, but it was also around the climate change. This is 7.5 years ago. So we then created a new team. It was called Future Cities and New Industries, and it was a dual reporting into our CDO to actually build new product offerings, and then also typical M&A investment banking to advise on a certain shift.
So everything goes very comfortably. You're enjoying your high-end London career. But at some point, you have this crazy idea. You decide to jump off the wagon from this very comfortable life and start something rather risky.
Well, I had done research for quite a long time on the space. My obsession, and it still is that we need 1.75 trillion annually to change cities and transportation to get to the goals that we've set. This is either regulation or we've actually set the goals voluntarily.
To change cities how? To make them
greener, just to get to the net zero goals that we wanted.
So neutral, carbon neutral.
Exactly.
That's a global figure?
It's a global figure.
You jump off HSBC, you decide to create your own company, which will do what?
Effectively, what I was seeing is that data transparency is huge. The biggest blocker is that we have huge amounts of innovation, from batteries to new forms of transportation, funding mechanisms, infrastructure. But the lack of data transparency means that we can't quantify or identify how to do it and when to do it.
Is it data transparency, or is it the ownership? You don't have access to the data?
Both, in fact. So what you have is, if I'm an auto manufacturer, I can see where the car is moving, but I can't see what's inside the car. Mm-hmm. If I am an energy provider, I can see how my charging infrastructure is working and my energy supply, but I can't see the demand. So it's the fact that you have these data silos and they're not speaking to each other. And that's even within divisions. If I'm an auto manufacturer, I can't see what the other auto manufacturer is doing.
So you set up Clearly, which is going to give us clearly some clarity on data, I presume. How does that solve this failure?
So it's both a business strategy and also a technology. The technology is that it's hardware agnostic, so we can seep across different sensors and different databases and actually blend them together, enhance them to give that transparency. And the way we get access to that data is that we're providing a solution now, which is to get fleet operators and owners to be compliant. So with that, that's how you're accessing all the data. And then you use the blended data and anonymized data to then enhance other data sets where you don't have access fully.
So clearly basically sees the failure of not having the data crunched into one place and allowing us to draw conclusions as a society of how to make our cities greener.
Exactly. It's across the supply chain. So if I am a tyre company, I will have the data that my tyre is going to reduce emissions by X. But because you can't then quantify that with a broader picture, it's hard then for the purchaser of the tyre to see whether actually they should go ahead with the bigger price or not. It's exactly the same in terms of if I have an X budget to electrify my fleet, where do I start first? So there you're having to then see if I'm having one zone that needs to be electrified, how do I even do it? So it's all around data transparency.
So one day you go to your boss at HSBC and you say, hello boss, what's the name of the boss?
He was at the Philippe Henry.
Philippe.
Yes.
Hey Philippe, we have to talk. I decided to take some time off. I'm actually leaving. And the reason I'm leaving is because I'm starting a new company. What does he say?
It was a hard one for him because he was an innovator and he always encouraged innovation across the bank and also myself to keep on innovating.
Was he surprised or he knew you well enough to know it was burning inside of you?
He knew that it would come. Mm-hmm. He didn't think it was going to come that quickly. And it was in the middle of COVID. Did
COVID have a part in your decision?
No, it was an inflection point when I knew that regulation was also increasing and the technology was ready. Mm-hmm. So at that point, I just knew I had to go. It was a tricky time because obviously during COVID, it was probably very risky. Mm-hmm. In its own right, it was easier because you weren't in the rush of being in an office, being on a plane, being in a very kind of formal environment. Mm-hmm. Everyone was at home. Mm-hmm. So from one day you are working for a very large organization and the next day you're working for yourself, but you're alone anyway.
Yeah, so you're in the same room.
Exactly. So in that regard, it was easier, but in the other regard, it was a bigger risk because of the times it were. Mm-hmm. So he knew, I think he was a little bit shocked it was coming then. Encouraged me to maybe think about it, do a bit more work.
So given that it's COVID and everything is remote, you couldn't look him in the eye, I suppose. You just sent him an email with your resignation letter. What about people around you? How did they react when you told them that you're now trying something completely new?
People thought that I was a bit crazy. My mum was very worried.
Was she?
Yes. She always backs whatever I do, but yeah, she was worried. Mm-hmm. She then thought that I was, enjoying life for about a year and a half. So I'd get calls kind of every week going, hello, darling, what are you up to today? Well, Mum, I'm running a business. Oh, that's nice.
I don't know for you, but for me, every time my parents try to stop me from doing something, I get even more eager to prove them wrong. Now I have yet another incentive to succeed. So
yes. No, people were a bit shocked. Actually, my uncle thought I was very crazy and irresponsible, mm-hmm. which does sound on paper. It does sound. I mean, I had a fantastic role. Brilliant role at HSBC. Lots of prospects ahead of me. Job security. Still learning. Could still grow, and I'm literally quitting for this crazy idea that may not go anywhere.
Okay, so HSBC kind of understands. Your immediate family is a bit concerned, but then you take it from a concept to the next level of what? Presenting it to investors?
The next from there, yes, I got a small amount of funding, and actually we were very quick to engage with customers. So we did land a big customer pretty early, mm-hmm. And we got access.
How did that happen?
I'd been working in the space for a very long time, so I was actually advising on exactly what I'm doing now for the past 7 years. So the access was definitely there, and it was like, I'm back, but I now have, as opposed to advising you, I have a solution.
Okay.
And
so in terms of risk, I mean, that was quite comfortable, no? I mean, kind of cushioned. So you have an idea, you don't even have the investors yet, and you already have clients. I mean, in this podcast series, not everybody had such a journey.
Sure, but I also got a wake-up call. I thought that actually the risk would not be there. Mm-hmm. I actually also thought that, why are startups raising 5 million? You raise 20, you can merge some companies together, do an exit. Typical kind of investment banking thought process.
It seemed easier than it was.
It seemed a lot easier, yes. I got a big wake-up call where, yes, we had a first customer, but they couldn't pay a lot. It was testing mode. I did not have a product. My idea back then was very similar to now, but there was the product aspect was definitely not there. So we got access to a lot of data, realized that actually that data was not relevant. It was cameras that were looking outside the vehicle versus the surroundings that we need. And then, grew from learnings and grew what now is a product, but back then was still a concept.
So after the first client, you go to still investors, or?
We did. We got some funding from very good investors, and that allowed us then to build an early version of the product. And then from there, we took on the largest retailer in the world. They were different in that normally a big multinational company will give you a very small segment of data. They just said, take on everything.
Wow.
So we tracked every vehicle across North America.
So how does that work? You're not buying their data. They're basically your clients. They give you their data and you're utilizing it and crunching it for them.
Yes, the go-to market product is effectively where companies now, if you're owning or managing a fleet, you actually need the data transparency to first state what is your scope 3, so your supply chain emissions, and also ensure that you are not breaking any regulations. It could be low emission zones, it could be a breach in terms of energy consumption. So to get that, what internal teams are doing is spending weeks of manually blending data together, and they still know that data is wrong. So we come in and we're the ones where they can send all their data to us, both their own and third-party data. We'll then blend it. We enhance it with the data we have. That could be traffic controls, weather controls, overlay the regulation, and that's where you then can give the trip level emission data required.
Okay, but the clients and the investors are not the same ones. I mean, you don't get invested by your own clients. They are separate.
I mean, you can. Typically, you do that a bit later stage. So we took money from investors in the space. In fact, they are two mobility funds. One is a technology fund and the other one is a climate. The mobility funds just knew from early on the pain point we were solving from the transportation side, which was fantastic. So the questions went very granular very quickly, and they could guide us as well. And their limited partners, so their investors, are also the customers of ours. So in a way, you can say they're the same.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is that your professional environment understood, your family thought it was crazy, but the next steps, it doesn't sound like it was that difficult for you to convince people that you were onto something. Clients from your previous network and environment trusted you. Investors came along. Given that you're not describing it as a very steep hill, it sounds like it was more or less okay. You had a concept, you developed it, they came. So where was the challenge then?
There are challenges all the time. You mess up all the time. You really do. This is an environment where we're building an AI technology. You do need capital to back this. And in this environment, what investors need is proof points. Fantastic, you've signed global and annual contracts, but are they reoccurring? Do you have that famous ARR of revenue coming in that I can see now this is secure? And that's normal in this environment. And I think also it's around people can trust you, but are you providing a product that is easy to implement? Are you solving their need? And that was actually one of the biggest mistakes that we made was with this first customer. They wanted a lot and we want to provide a lot, which the customer is always right. But if you want to create a product, you've got to know where to say no to say yes or a lot later. So that discipline also, and knowing what the product is, knowing where to say no to and where to say yes to, that's what was the difficult roadmap.
But I presume that your advantage compared to other entrepreneurs, that at least you knew the banking and the investors industry quite well from your previous role, because you basically changed seats around the table from the investor you were before to an entrepreneur you were now. So did you better understand the mindset of investors because you were among them earlier?
I did, but I was not an operator. And you always think that you know more before you do this. As a first-time founder, I mean, I think that you go in with a naive mindset.
Really? Do you find that around you, that it's a common trait of first-time entrepreneurs, that they're overconfident?
Yes.
Otherwise, you would never jump into the water, maybe?
I think so. I think that naivety actually is very good because if you knew how bumpy it was going to be, I think you would take a second.
Please don't say that, because I want this podcast to inspire people to do what you did and follow your trail. Don't listen to what you just said. Do it.
I would say, though, listen, this is the hardest thing that I've ever done.
Really?
And everyone would tell you that the same, especially as an entrepreneur. But it's the most invigorating thing as well. And it's the small things. It's the small wins. You have to take those small wins. Those small wins could be that a client comes back and says, wow, like this is awesome. That's a huge win. Or you persuade a fantastic talent to come and join the company and you see them grow and you see them do well. I think that's a huge win.
And why is it the hardest thing you've ever done?
It's the hardest thing because
you strike me as someone who's had different, you're ambitious, you must have had significant challenges before. Why is this more difficult than anything you had done before?
You're always naked. You're always naked. If you're in a big corporation, you can hide. So if you do things that are wrong, you can just hide behind the big corporation.
Naked to whom? To your own employees? To your clients? To your investors?
To everyone. Everyone. You're always naked. So there's nowhere to run. And you're fronting, right? You're fronting a very talented and smart team with talented and smart customers. And there's nowhere to run.
So do they challenge you, your own people?
Of course. If they don't, then we're not growing. Of course, I'm hiring.
I don't know. It depends on your management style. Do you invite them to challenge you? And
for sure.
Yeah?
For sure. It's a culture where, yes, I need to be called out on, and they're building it, right? I'm basically just conducting an orchestra, and my role is to make sure they have the right equipment, they're speaking to her correctly. Sometimes it's a little bit loud in one corner. They maybe need to give someone else space to also grow, and that's how you're building a product, right?
So we invited you to be part of this podcast because you just won the European Startup Prize for Mobility, which is Europe's largest acceleration program for mobility startups and one of the most prestigious labels in this field.
So once everybody gets on stage, the vice president. All right, so as everybody's making their way to the stage, thank you, jury members, evaluators.
And at this point, I should also mention that all the startups participating in this podcast are those who won this year's edition of the European Startup Prize for Mobility, which is Europe's largest acceleration program for clean mobility startups. The Startup Prize is a private-public initiative which brings together all major EU institutions, national authorities, philanthropies, and multinational companies who jointly scout, rank, and boost Europe's most promising clean mobility startups. This year, the prize received over 700 applications from all across Europe, and you went through a very rigorous selection process, both written and in front of a professional jury, to have won among the top 10. You're now part of the acceleration program, which brought you. We're recording this conversation in Helsinki as part of the Winners European Tour. So we just visited Slush, but also part of your prize is being in touch with the prize partners for investment and business partnerships, presentation to VCs and CVCs. So there's lots happening for you with the other 9 startups all across Europe. I should mention to the listeners that if you want to learn about all the other startups, you can visit startupprize.eu.
Have a wonderful evening and see you all at the 6th edition of the European Startup Prize for Mobility.
But are you safe and sound now? Can you say that you have successfully crossed the notorious valley of death when it came to funding, at least?
No, we can't. We're in a position now where, for some say it's a nice position to be in. Actually, it's a little bit risky as well, is that we have demand for the product, but we now need the capital to actually fully fulfill those contracts. It's a very tough environment. I think everyone knows that. And so people are being very cautious. We're actually live raising. And our current investors are rightly so being rather selective in who we take to the cap table. But no, we're definitely not there yet. I don't think you're ever there, actually. I think you always are going to have this.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing. You're always living. I mean, if you're there, then you're too comfortable. I don't think actually, even friends who have exited and are IPO'd, you're still nervous in the belly. If you're not, I think you're not pushing hard enough.
But do you still congratulate yourself?
I think it's a healthy thing to do, yes. And I really try to get the team to do it and take a step back and say, okay.
I didn't ask about the team, I asked about yourself.
Probably not, no. I think I'm still too nervous.
If you were to congratulate yourself for what you've accomplished with Clearly, what would it be for?
The team.
The team?
Persuading each and every one of the people to join the team was huge. I'm really proud of every one of them.
No, it's interesting because it's something that does come up with different entrepreneurs that I interviewed here, that they do talk about the challenges and the frustrations and the loneliness and difficulty, but they're also proud. But I guess it makes sense because they recruited them. You know, they selected those people. I mean, it sounds so cliche, but it's some kind of a new family for them.
I wouldn't call it a family. I think it's you have to be careful, in my view, to call it that because work-life balance. We're definitely a very strong unit. I think it's more that think about it. You build something out of nothing, right? You're this. It's a crazy idea, but it's your idea, and you build it, and you've managed to persuade people to come and follow your idea. That's so rewarding. They don't have to, right? I mean, and they're also, job security. They're going to get job security. I try to manage the business that when I hire someone, I can look them in the eye and I'm going to give them job security for at least the next year, which is not always the case in a startup. It's a very fine balance in terms of how you're managing the business. But they're still, that you persuaded them to come to you. And they're talented, right? They could go to so many different places and they're following your idea. That's so rewarding.
Do you have any advice to give to somebody else in your shoes when it comes to attracting talent?
Hire smart people, then give them the tools. Of course, make sure they're connected again, but empower them. They need to be empowered.
How do you empower them?
An example the other day was we have a relatively junior data scientist. He's junior, but he's very
Brilliant.
talented.
I had a feeling you were going to say that. I don't know the person.
No, but it's when I hired him at the start, I thought, okay, this person's going to be a bit difficult or a complete superstar, and he's a complete superstar. And we were with it was a board member of a very large transportation company, and I said, hey, you're presenting next week because it's your thing, right? And the meeting was slightly slower, but he nailed it and he did so well. And I was like, you owned that. So now the success of this customer is going to be on him. And when we're hiring now, it's not that I'm going to be hiring, he's involved and it's going to be his team and his division. If he has new ideas, come. Do we drive the data aspect of in terms of certain transportation data in X area? You're the expert, right? Come to me, like pitch. So it's empowering in that sense. I think also we have a policy in the company where everyone gets share options. So we are really, it's our thing. We're building this.
Is that exceptional in your environment?
I think that every company is run differently. So some do have share options for everyone. Some it's only for the management team. You even have very large companies that are doing it. So everyone really feels a part of it. But I think it's important. I really do.
Is that part of the values of the company? You're talking about empowerment. You're talking about, I would call it transparency. If you're saying that you're challenged by your own employees.
Yes.
What else do you try to convey? I mean, we speak a lot about inclusion. Is that something that is...
It's really important on all aspects. We're very lucky. We have we do have a good mix in terms of we want
in terms of gender, you mean?
On gender, we do have a good mix. We're always trying to improve, and we're obviously always trying to hire the best talent. But that mix of talent is actually fantastic when you do have that gender equality in the room, and that also includes data scientists. That are also now come to the
Where there
table.
are less women to hire, you mean?
There are more and more now. There really are. And it obviously all starts from education. And I think that's that education part now in terms of the younger talent, you are seeing a bit more of a balance as such.
At the risk of sounding sexist, and I do consider myself a feminist man, is a business run by a woman run differently? Is there more empathy? Is there more, I don't know, or am I just, or these are just cliches?
Okay, yes, I guess there is, yes. I think you can run a business where you still can have honestly, I don't know. It is a hard question because I don't want to speak also from that a man would also not be empathetic. I think it's a characteristic thing. You can either be, I think in the technology startup world, sometimes it's renowned to be quite aggressive and a bit cutthroat. I don't think you need to manage a business like that to be successful. I think it's more around encouragement. And of course, you can feel when someone is not passionate about what they're doing. Okay, then help them. Let me understand. Let me understand what's going on. Is this the right role for you? Do you have the right tools? Are you being listened to? Or is there something at home, right? Not having to go into that personal aspect, but just to be aware of it. So I think that's an area where it's another form of empowerment and it's another form of productivity.
Danielle, what should I wish you, or clearly? Obviously, you're fundraising, but what other milestones or KPIs or objectives do you have now lying ahead of you?
Gosh, next year's going to be really exciting. It really is, because we've got to a point now where, so we're at the end of 23. We have now got our fourth customer, but we obviously deal with very large customers. They're different customers in themselves. And the exciting thing is that they keep telling us about their problems, which is our problem. And it is the product, which is so exciting. And next year, when we close this funding round, we have a very rich pipeline, and it's exciting what we're going to be bringing on. There's going to be big partnerships, big customers coming, and the team, right? To grow this team and to see this build up, I think 2024 is going to be a really exciting year.
But that's happening, it seems, anyway. What should I wish you on top?
I think it probably is. A better investment environment would be very helpful.
Are you still in touch with Philippe?
Philippe? Very much
from
so.
From HSBC.
Very much so.
Okay. He doesn't know that he's now starring this episode. But what does he think about where Clearly stands right now? Does he understand your decision back then? Does it make sense to him more than it did back then?
Yes, he's always been supportive. And for actually,
you know I'm going to ask that question as well. What does your mom think now? She was skeptical. Not because it's you, not because she doesn't trust you, but because she's a mother and her job is to worry. But does she see you now? Is she reassured now?
No, not yet, actually, no.
At the same time, you said that you will never be reassured yourself. You cannot expect her what you're not expecting from yourself. I also suspect, without being your shrink, and this is maybe the concept for the next podcast, that you don't congratulate yourself that much. Maybe that makes it more difficult for your mother, and I'm way out of my zone here to congratulate you. But
maybe.
Okay, I'll ask it differently. Would Danielle of 2013 be proud of Danielle of 2023 professionally? I'm not digging into your personal life. You just said, work-life balance. But do you think that back then, if I described to you where you would be sitting right now, you just won the European Startup Prize for Mobility with your fairly newly established startup. You're now in Helsinki because you're presenting at Slush. You are considered one of the most promising startups in clean mobility across Europe. Yes, you're still struggling like the life of a startup. Do you think that if I describe that to you when you're sitting in some high skyscraper building office in London, telling you this is what your life is going to look like in 2023, how would you have reacted?
Yeah, you put it in a different light. Danielle is doing what makes her happy every single day. And I think that everyone should aspire to have that. So I guess.
Amen. This was What Were They Thinking? The stories behind Europe's most promising clean mobility startups. You can find all episodes on our podcast platform. I'm Dan Somovitz, here with Danielle Walsh. Travel sustainably and see you next time.